Thank you very much for your information today. It's very helpful. Besides calculating by the number of days, have you considered taking people's salaries, dividing it by the number of days, and actually showing them in their pockets how much their spendable income goes down every day that's added?
I think it would pay to do two things. One, if you made X dollar, the challenge is people have different incomes, but if you made X amount of money, here's how much goes to the cost of government, not just in an annualized basis. But the other thing, you do it in an 8-hour day. How many hours a day are you working for the government? Different people react to it. The purpose of this is to give people something other than jillions of dollars. You know, how much is the government spending? Much. And there's the old story about the fellow, the tribe that counts one too many. Okay, well in politics we got sort of hundreds, millions, many. And so everything that helps dramatize and make clear, and for different people it's different things. I like 1 out of 100 percentage. Other people like how many days. Hours in the day. An average earner earns X. How much goes to government? That would be another way of doing it.
In the back there?
My question is, if folks are visiting town halls during this August recess, are there particular points from the report that you think would make good questions for people to bring up with their representatives and senators?
If I could toss out two suggestions, and they both come from work that Sandra Fabry's done with the Center for Fiscal Accountability. It's the two types of transparency. The first is transparency on the way in. One of the things that is being asked of congressmen and senators in some of these town hall meetings that so upsets them is, will you promise to read the bill before you vote for it? Mm-hmm. This was the problem that Sebelius and Specter had when it came up, and it's what a number of the Democratic leaders have laughed and said if you had to read the bills we wouldn't pass anything. I think that reform, I guess Congressman Boehner has a bill to require a 3-day waiting period before the House could vote on a bill. It'd have to be on the web for everybody in America to read for 3 days. I tend to think 3 days is not enough. I really think it needs to be 5 days. We need a full week so that, because when they throw something up, I'm not necessarily going to go to work and read it that day. What I'm more likely to do is somebody in the press, a blogger, other people would read the bill, send something out by email or even by snail mail or in the newspaper the next day to say this is what's happening, and then I might then have a chance to go look at it. But I think if we had a requirement that any piece of legislation, before it could be voted on in the House or the Senate, and if it gets amended, the 5-day waiting period starts again. Okay, there's a cooling off period that some people used to want to do that for handguns. Well, some of these pieces of legislation are a lot more damaging than a handgun. And a 5-day cooling off period so that people could actually read it. And if you're going to have 1,000-page bills, you need that kind of time period. Now, my sense is that if you knew that anything you were putting into a piece of legislation was going to be online for 5 days, you wouldn't have stuff snuck in because everything would be found out. The stuff that went into the stimulus package to give the Goldman Sachs guys bonuses and things, none of that goes into a bill if you know it's going to be there for 5 days. So transparency on the way in is one of the things that I think can come out of the unpleasantness of the last couple of years with people throwing 1,000-page bills up and overnight tarps. You know, we must give $750 million to my friends. Why? Trust me, it's an emergency. Nothing's an emergency. They can't wait 5 days for people to read the legislation. The other is transparency on the way out. And that's one where there's been some baby steps at the national level, but more than that at the state level. Texas, for instance, posts every contract the state enters into. Every expenditure, every check is up on the web with a search engine, so you can find out how much Joe and what company he's got in terms of payments. And Utah and Florida have just this year passed it, so it's not up and running. But those two states have passed what I believe is the future of transparency. A requirement that all state contracts be posted all state spending be posted, every check that they write, and the same requirement on all political subdivisions, schools, special taxing districts that nobody knew existed, would go up online, cities, towns. I would like to see the city of Chicago's books online. I would like to see Miami's spending online. So when you have transparency on the way in and transparency on the way out, I'm a lot more confident that what's in the bills will improve at both levels. Because if you know everyone's going to read it, you don't stick in crap. And if you know everybody's going to be able to follow the dollars, you don't hide the stuff to your friends because it's not going to get there. And people will see it happen. So transparency isn't the same thing as saying you can't do X. But if you're going to do X, the whole world will be watching and see exactly what you did. And if you're proud of that, good, let's do it. But if you're not proud of it, it probably never gets into the legislation in the first place.
Yes, please.
Yeah, Grover, I was wondering, would you add to that list the Fed? As you know, the Fed is saying that you can't come in and audit it because it has this private component. They have the right to, you know, they have a proprietary practices and that sort of thing. And as you probably also know, just the other day, the federal court turned down a FOIA challenge against the Federal Reserve. They would not allow the FOIA to go through. So what I'm saying is that, let's say that there is some legitimacy on the part of the banks of saying, look, by doing an open audit and putting us up on the web, you're interfering with our right to competitive banking. You know, it's a proprietary matter. Is that just an excuse, or would you say, yeah, we've got to protect that, and you can't ask for that kind of transparency from the Fed?
I have had two surprises this year. The first was the power of the spending issue, which had not been the case before, or at least not been visibly the case before, and clearly is this year. The other is the idea that you could get a majority of the members of the U.S. House of Representatives to co-sponsor legislation to require an audit of the Federal Reserve System, because I didn't think most Americans knew what the Fed was or cared enough about it. And one of the things that flowed from Ron Paul's presidential campaign was that people in the minority, but a persistent, interested, informed, educated, did I say persistent minority of people feel very strongly about this, to the point where it's 270 co-sponsors for that legislation? 290, okay, keeps changing. 290 co-sponsors in the House to audit the Fed. That you could get that many people that interested and convince congressmen that they better get on this bill, because people keep gnawing on their ankles if they don't. That has been a pleasant, those are both pleasant surprises, by the way. I'm pleasantly surprised that people get excited about spending, and I'm pleasantly surprised that people consider a transparent Fed, an audited Fed, to be worthy of their time, attention, and activity, and have been able to communicate that to congressmen who probably couldn't spell Fed.